She was kicked out by her ex-husband. She married a millionaire CEO who loved her. Now he regrets it. Nora Benson stood on the sidewalk in the pouring rain, a single suitcase at her feet and nowhere to go. 20 minutes earlier, she'd had a home, a marriage, a life she'd built with her own 2 hands. Now, she had nothing. Her ex-husband, Marcus, had thrown her out in front of their neighbors, his voice dripping with contempt as he called her a burden, a failure, dead weight he could no longer afford to carry. She'd sacrificed everything for him, her career, her dreams, her identity, only to be discarded the moment his business collapsed. The humiliation burned deeper than the cold rain soaking through her coat. But Nora Benson wasn't broken. Not yet. A week later, fate intervened in the form of Adrian Cole, a millionaire CEO with quiet intensity and eyes that saw past her pain to the strength underneath. He didn't offer her pity. He offered her a job, then his respect, then something she'd stopped believing in: love. Within a year, they were married, and for the first time in her life, Nora felt like she mattered. But happiness has a way of inviting disaster. When Adrian's empire came under attack and her past was weaponized against him, he said words that shattered her all over again, words she'd heard before, words that made her walk away from the only man who'd ever truly loved her. Now Adrian Cole, the man who has everything, has lost the one thing money can't buy, and he'll do anything to get her back. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is about betrayal, redemption, and a love powerful enough to survive even the cruelest words. The rain came down in sheets, turning the quiet suburban street into a blur of grey and cold. Nora Benson stood on the sidewalk outside the house she'd called home for 5 years, her entire body shaking, though whether from cold or shock, she couldn't tell anymore. Behind her, the front door of the modest 2-story colonial slammed shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. She stared at that closed door, at the warm light glowing through the windows, at the life she'd just been exiled from, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. 20 minutes ago, she'd been inside that house, trying to calm Marcus down after another devastating phone call from his business partner. Another investor had pulled out. Another deal had fallen through. His tech startup, the one he'd poured everything into for 3 years, was collapsing, and somehow it had become her fault. "This is your fault," Marcus had screamed, his face red with rage and humiliation. "If you'd been more supportive, if you'd actually contributed something, instead of just existing in my space. I gave up my career for you," Nora had said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I gave up teaching so I could support you full-time. I believed in you when no one else did." "And what good did that do?" Marcus had shot back. "You think your belief pays the bills? You think your little pep talks are worth anything when I'm drowning in debt?" Their friends, Tom and Jennifer, had been there for dinner, a dinner Nora had cooked, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy despite the mounting pressure. They stood frozen in the living room, uncomfortable witnesses to a marriage imploding. "Marcus, maybe you should calm down," Tom had tried to interject, but Marcus was beyond reason. "You want to know the truth," he'd said, turning to face Nora with cruelty in his eyes. "You're dead weight. You've been dead weight since the beginning. I thought having a wife would make me look stable, responsible, but all you've done is drain me. Financially, emotionally, everything." Nora had felt something inside her break at those words. Not her spirit that had broken months ago. Slowly, piece by piece, as Marcus's business failed and he'd become someone she didn't recognize. This was something else. This was the final severing of hope that he might still be the man she'd married. "Get out," Marcus had said, his voice dropping to something cold and final. "Pack a bag and get out. I can't afford to keep you anymore." "Marcus, you can't be serious," Jennifer had said, her voice shocked. "I'm dead serious," Marcus had replied, not taking his eyes off Nora. "This is my house, my name on the lease, and I want her gone." Nora had stood there for a moment, waiting for him to take it back, to apologize, to show even a flicker of the man who'd once promised to love her forever. But he just stared at her with contempt, so she'd gone upstairs, packed a single suitcase with whatever she could grab in 10 minutes, and walked out of the house, while Marcus watched from the doorway and their friends stood in mortified silence. And now here she was, standing in the rain with nowhere to go. Nora picked up her suitcase, her fingers numb from cold, and started walking. She had no plan, no destination, just the need to move, to put distance between herself and the humiliation of what had just happened. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from Jennifer. "Nora, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Where are you going?" Nora stared at the message but couldn't bring herself to respond. Where was she going? She had no family in the city. Her parents had passed away years ago. Her closest friends had all been Marcus's friends first, people who would inevitably take his side or at least stay neutral to avoid drama. She had $300 in her checking account, money she'd been saving from the small online tutoring gigs she'd been doing secretly, knowing Marcus would see it as a betrayal that she was working at all when she was supposed to be focused solely on supporting him. $300, one suitcase, and a wedding ring she should probably take off but couldn't quite bring herself to yet. Nora walked until she found a bus stop with a small overhang that offered minimal shelter from the rain. She sat down on the wet bench, set her suitcase beside her, and finally let herself cry. Not because she was leaving Marcus. If she was honest with herself, she'd stopped loving him months ago, maybe even a year ago. The man she'd married, kind, ambitious, full of dreams, had slowly been replaced by someone bitter, cruel, and self-destructive. She cried because she'd wasted 5 years, because she'd given up a career she loved, teaching literature to high school students, to be a supportive wife to a man who saw her as nothing more than an accessory. She cried because she was 32 years old and starting over with nothing, and she cried because some part of her believed what Marcus had said, that she was a burden, that she hadn't contributed enough, that her support, her belief, her love, none of it had been worth anything. The bus came eventually. Nora got on without knowing where it was going, paid the fare, and rode until she saw a cheap motel with a vacancy sign glowing in neon pink. She got off at the next stop and walked back. The motel was exactly what she expected: worn carpet, flickered lighting, the smell of old cigarettes clinging to everything despite the no-smoking policy. But it was $40 a night, which meant she could afford a week if she was careful. The clerk barely looked at her as she paid in cash and took the key to room 107. Inside, the room was small and depressing: a double bed with a faded floral comforter, a TV bolted to the dresser, a bathroom with cracked tiles and water-stained walls. Nora set her suitcase on the bed, sat down beside it, and stared at the wall. This was her life now. This was what she'd been reduced to. She thought about calling someone Jennifer, maybe, or her old college roommate who lived 3 states away. But what would she say? That her husband had thrown her out? That she had nowhere to go and no prospects? That she'd sacrificed everything and had nothing to show for it? The shame was too heavy. So Nora did what she'd learned to do over the past year of her marriage falling apart. She pushed the emotions down, focused on survival, and made a plan. Tomorrow, she would start looking for work. She still had her teaching credentials, though they'd need to be renewed. In the meantime, she could tutor, waitress, do anything that would bring in money. She would find an apartment, something small and affordable. She would rebuild her life, piece by piece, the same way she'd watched it fall apart. And she would never, ever let herself be dependent on someone else again. The next week was a blur of rejections. Nora applied for every teaching position she could find, but they all wanted someone who'd been active in the field recently. Her 5-year gap was a red flag no amount of explaining could overcome. "I was supporting my husband's business," she'd said in one interview. The principal had given her a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I understand, but we need someone who's current with classroom management techniques and curriculum standards. Perhaps you could consider substitute teaching to get back into it." Substitute teaching paid barely above minimum wage and offered no stability. Nora applied anyway. She also applied to tutor, to work retail, to do administrative work, anything that might provide steady income. Most places didn't even call her back. By the end of the week, Nora's $300 had dwindled to $75. She'd eaten nothing but ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. She'd extended her motel stay by negotiating a weekly rate with the manager, but she'd have to leave by next Friday if she didn't find income. On the 8th day after Marcus kicked her out, Nora sat in a coffee shop nursing a single cup of coffee she'd been making last for 3 hours. The coffee shop was warm, clean, and had free Wi-Fi. She'd been using it as her office, sending out applications and trying to stay out of the depressing motel room as much as possible. She was reading a book she'd found in the motel's lobby, a worn copy of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, one of the texts that had inspired her to become a teacher in the first place. She'd always believed in education as liberation, as the key to helping people find their voices and their power. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd let herself become voiceless and powerless despite that belief. "That's heavy reading for a Tuesday afternoon," a voice said. Nora looked up, startled. A man stood beside her table, holding a cup of coffee and a slight smile. He was tall, maybe late 30s, with dark hair touched with grey at the temples and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see more than most people did. He was dressed impeccably, expensive suit, tailored perfectly, the kind of clothing that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. "I'm sorry," Nora said, caught off guard. "Freire," the man said, gesturing to her book. "Not exactly light afternoon reading. Are you a teacher?" "I was," Nora said carefully. "I'm between positions right now." The man's expression shifted slightly, understanding flickering across his features. "Do you mind if I sit?" he asked. "I'm Adrian, by the way. Adrian Cole." Nora hesitated, her instinct for self-preservation warring with basic politeness. But there was something in his demeanor that felt safe, not aggressive or predatory, just genuinely interested. "Nora," she said, "Nora Benson. And sure, you can sit." Adrian settled into the chair across from her with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in any situation. "So, Freire," he said, "what draws you to his work?" Nora looked down at the book, her fingers tracing the worn cover. "I used to teach high school literature," she said. "I loved it, and I always believed that education should do more than just transfer information. It should help students find their voices, think critically, question systems that keep them powerless." "That's a beautiful philosophy," Adrian said. "Why did you leave teaching?" The question was casual, but it touched a nerve. Nora's first instinct was to deflect, to give some polite non-answer, and change the subject. But something in Adrian's eyes, genuine interest, no judgment, made her pause. "I gave it up to support my husband's business," she said quietly. "He needed me full-time, and I thought that's what you did for someone you loved. You sacrificed." "And now?" Adrian asked gently. Nora's jaw tightened. "Now I'm divorced and trying to figure out how to rebuild a career I walked away from 5 years ago. Turns out, gaps in your resume make you basically unemployable." She hadn't meant to be so honest, and the moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. But Adrian didn't flinch or offer empty platitudes. "The education system's loss," he said simply. "Anyone who's passionate about Freire and critical pedagogy is someone schools should be fighting to hire." "Tell that to the principals who won't even give me an interview," Nora said with a bitter laugh. Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her with those perceptive blue eyes. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. If you could design your ideal position, not limited by practicality or current job openings, what would it look like?" Nora blinked, surprised by the question. No one had asked her that in years. Marcus had only ever asked what she could do to help him, never what she wanted for herself. "I'd want to work with underserved communities," she said slowly, the dream taking shape as she spoke. "Kids who don't have access to quality education, who've been written off by the system. I'd want to create programs that don't just teach them to pass tests, but help them see their own potential." "Scholarships, mentorship, after-school programs?" Adrian prompted. "All of it," Nora said, warming to the topic despite herself. "A comprehensive support system, because it's not enough to just throw money at the problem. These kids need advocates, people who believe in them." Adrian smiled, and it transformed his entire face from handsome to genuinely warm. "What if I told you I run a foundation that does exactly that?" he said. Nora's heart skipped. "What?" "The Cole Foundation," Adrian said. "We focus on educational equity and community development. Right now, we're expanding our scholarship program and need someone to coordinate it. Someone who understands that education is about more than test scores." Nora stared at him, her mind racing. "You're offering me a job," she said carefully. "You don't even know me." "I know you're passionate about education," Adrian said. "I know you think critically about systemic issues. I know you're rebuilding your life and could use an opportunity. and I trust my instincts about people. This feels too good to be true, Nora said, her defensive walls slamming up. What's the catch? Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression open and honest. No catch, he said. I'm a businessman, Nora. I recognize talent when I see it, and I don't believe in letting it go to waste because of resume gaps or bad circumstances. If you're interested, come to the foundation office tomorrow. We'll talk details, you can meet the team, see if it's a good fit. He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. Nora picked it up, her hands trembling slightly. Adrian Cole, CEO, Cole Foundation. Below that, an address in one of the nicer parts of the city and a phone number. Why are you doing this? Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian stood, picking up his coffee. Because everyone deserves a second chance, he said simply. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Think about it. He left before Nora could respond, and she sat there staring at the business card like it might disappear if she looked away. Nora didn't sleep that night. She lay in the uncomfortable motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning Adrian's offer over in her mind. Every instinct she had screamed that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch, some ulterior motive, some way this would blow up in her face. Marcus had conditioned her to expect disappointment, to believe that nothing good came without a price. But another part of her, the part that still believed in possibilities, in second chances, in the idea that sometimes kindness was just. Kindness whispered that maybe this was real. Maybe Adrian Cole was exactly what he seemed, a wealthy man who genuinely wanted to help. By the time her alarm went off at 7, Nora had made her decision. She would go to the interview. She would hear what he had to say. And if it felt wrong, if there was any hint of something inappropriate or manipulative, she would walk away. But she wouldn't reject an opportunity out of fear. She'd spent 5 years making herself small, afraid to want things, afraid to take up space. She was done with that. Nora dressed in the only professional outfit she'd packed, a simple black dress and cardigan that had seen better days but were clean and presentable. She did her makeup carefully, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes and the pallor that came from a week of stress and poor nutrition. She looked in the motel bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. When had she become this person, this tired, scared, diminished version of who she used to be? Today, you start getting her back, Nora told her reflection. The Cole Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek building in the heart of the city's business district. Nora arrived 15 minutes early and spent that time in the lobby, trying to calm her nerves. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, with art on the walls and comfortable seating. Nothing like the cold, corporate spaces Marcus had dragged her to for networking events. At exactly 10 o'clock, Nora approached the reception desk. "I'm here to see Adrian Cole," she said. "My name is Nora Benson." The receptionist smiled warmly. "He's expecting you. Take the elevator to the 12th floor. Someone will meet you there." The elevator ride felt both too fast and too slow. When the doors opened, Nora stepped into a bright, open space that hummed with purposeful energy. People moved between offices and conference rooms, their conversations animated and engaged. This was a place where people cared about what they were doing. A woman in her 50s approached, her smile genuine. "Nora, I'm Patricia Kim, Director of Programs. Adrian asked me to give you a tour before your meeting with him." "Nice to meet you," Nora said, shaking her hand. Patricia led her through the Foundation's offices, explaining their various programs, scholarships for first-generation college students, after-school tutoring in underserved neighborhoods, teacher training workshops, community education initiatives, everything Nora had dreamed of doing when she first became a teacher. "We've grown significantly in the past 5 years," Patricia said. "Adrian is very committed to making a real difference, not just writing checks. He believes in sustainable, community-driven change." "How long have you worked here?" Nora asked. 8 years, Patricia said. "Best job I've ever had. Adrian gives us the resources and autonomy to actually do good work. It's rare." They ended the tour in a conference room with windows overlooking the city. "Adrian will be with you in just a moment," Patricia said. "Can I get you some coffee? Water?" "Water would be great," Nora said. "Thank you." Patricia left, and Nora stood by the window, looking out at the city sprawling below. A week ago, she'd been standing in the rain with nowhere to go. Now she was here, in a beautiful office, about to interview for a job that sounded too good to be true. The door opened behind her. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Adrian said, entering with 2 bottles of water. Meeting ran long. He'd traded yesterday's suit for something slightly less formal but equally well-tailored. He looked tired. Nora noticed there were lines around his eyes that spoke of long hours and heavy responsibility. But his smile was warm as he gestured for her to sit. "So," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "what did you think of the tour?" "It's impressive," Nora said honestly. "Everything Patricia showed me, it's exactly the kind of work I've always wanted to do." "Tell me about your teaching experience," Adrian said. "What did you love about it? What were your challenges?" And so Nora talked. She told him about her 5 years teaching at an underfunded public high school, about the students who arrived hungry and left to chaotic home lives, about the moments of breakthrough when a struggling reader finally connected with a book or a disengaged student found their voice in a class discussion. She told him about the frustrations too, the lack of resources, the pressure to teach to standardized tests, the bureaucracy that prioritized compliance over actual learning. Adrian listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions, challenging her assumptions in ways that made her think deeper rather than feel defensive. By the time she finished, an hour had passed, and Nora realized she'd been more animated and engaged than she'd been in years. "You're passionate about this work," Adrian observed. "That passion is exactly what we need for our scholarship program coordinator position." "You're seriously offering me the job?" Nora asked, still not quite believing it. "I am," Adrian said, pending the usual background checks and references, of course. "But yes, I'd like to offer you the position." He slid a folder across the table. Nora opened it to find a job description and a salary offer that made her breath catch. It was more than she'd made as a teacher, enough to get her out of that motel, into a real apartment, back on her feet. This is incredibly generous," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's fair compensation for important work," Adrian corrected gently. "You'll be managing a multi-million-dollar scholarship program, coordinating with schools and community organizations, and helping shape the future of hundreds of young people. That's worth investing in." Nora looked up at him, tears burning in her eyes, despite her best efforts to maintain composure. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. "You don't know anything about me beyond a 20-minute conversation in a coffee shop." Adrian was quiet for a moment, and something shifted in his expression, something that looked like understanding born from experience. "5 years ago," he said slowly, "I was going through a difficult time, personal issues that were affecting my work, my life, everything. I was at a conference, sitting alone at the bar, probably looking as lost as I felt." He paused, his gaze distant. "A woman I'd never met sat down next to me and said, 'Whatever you're going through, you look like someone who could use a reminder that it gets better.' We talked for 2 hours. She didn't know who I was, didn't want anything from me, just offered genuine human kindness when I needed it most." Adrian focused back on Nora. "I never saw her again, never got to thank her properly for that moment of grace. So now, when I see someone who's clearly going through something difficult, someone with talent and passion who just needs an opportunity, I think of her, and I try to pay that kindness forward." Nora felt tears spill over, and she wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. It's been a really hard week." "You don't have to apologize," Adrian said, "and you don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share. But I want you to know that whatever circumstances brought you to that coffee shop, whatever you're rebuilding from, you're not alone in this." Nora took a shaky breath. "My husband kicked me out," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "A week ago, in front of our friends. He said I was a burden, that I'd contributed nothing to our marriage. I've been living in a motel, applying for jobs, trying to figure out how to start over." She looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry. You didn't ask for my sob story, Nora," Adrian said firmly. When she looked up, his eyes were kind but fierce. "Your ex-husband is a fool. Whatever failures he experienced, whatever business collapsed, that's on him, not you. And the fact that he blamed you, that he threw you out instead of facing his own shortcomings, that tells me everything I need to know about his character." He leaned forward slightly. "You are not a burden. You are talented, passionate, and resilient. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you." Nora felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight since that night in the rain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Adrian said. "Just take the job, do the work you're meant to do, and let that be proof that you were never the problem." Nora looked down at the job offer, at the chance to rebuild not just her career but her sense of self. "When would I start?" she asked. Adrian smiled. "How does Monday sound?" "Monday sounds perfect," Nora said, and for the first time in a week, she felt something that might have been hope. The first month at the Cole Foundation was transformative. Nora threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. She coordinated scholarship applications, visited schools to talk with students about opportunities, worked with Patricia and the rest of the team to streamline their processes and expand their reach. She was good at it. Better than good she was. Exceptional. And for the first time in 5 years, Nora felt like herself again. She'd moved out of the motel within 2 weeks, finding a small but clean studio apartment in a safe neighborhood. It wasn't much, just a converted loft with exposed brick and minimal furniture, but it was hers. No one could take it away from her. She'd also filed for divorce, finally taking off the wedding ring that had felt like a shackle and sending the papers to Marcus through a lawyer she could now afford. He hadn't contested it, hadn't reached out, had simply signed the papers and disappeared from her life as thoroughly as he'd kicked her out of it. Good riddance. What surprised Nora most, though, was her growing friendship with Adrian. He wasn't like any CEO she'd imagined. He was hands-on with the foundation's work, attending program events and meeting with scholarship recipients personally. He was thoughtful, asking her opinion on decisions and actually listening to her answers. And he was kind in ways that had nothing to do with grand gestures. When he noticed she was working through lunch every day, he started having healthy meals delivered to her office with notes that said things like, "Can't change the world on an empty stomach." When she mentioned missing teaching, he arranged for her to lead a workshop for high school students interested in educational equity. When she had a particularly difficult day dealing with a student whose scholarship application had been denied due to a technicality, Adrian sat with her for an hour brainstorming solutions until they found a way to make it work. He never made her feel like these kindnesses were transactional, never implied she owed him anything. He just showed up, consistently, the way Marcus never had. 3 months into her job, Nora realized with startling clarity that she was developing feelings for her boss. It terrified her. She'd just gotten out of a marriage that had destroyed her self-worth. The last thing she needed was to complicate her professional life with romantic feelings, especially for someone so far out of her league. Adrian Cole was a millionaire CEO. She was a divorced woman still rebuilding her life. It would never work. So Nora did what she'd learned to do. She pushed the feelings down and focused on her work. But ignoring feelings didn't make them disappear, and she couldn't help but notice the way Adrian looked at her sometimes like she was someone worth seeing, like she mattered. It was dangerous. It was impossible. And it was the first thing in years that made Nora feel truly alive. 4 months after Nora started at the foundation, Adrian asked her to stay late to help him prepare for a major donor presentation. They worked in his office until past 9, reviewing slides and refining talking points, falling into the easy rhythm they'd developed over months of collaboration. "We make a good team," Adrian said as they finally finished, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile. "We do," Nora agreed, saving the final version of the presentation. "Can I ask you something personal?" Adrian said. Nora's heart rate picked up. "Sure. Are you happy here? At the foundation, I mean. Is this work fulfilling for you?" "It's the most fulfilled I've been in years," Nora said honestly. "Why?" Adrian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. "Because you deserve to be happy," he said quietly, "and I want to make sure I'm creating an environment where you can be." There was something in his tone that made Nora stand and join him at the window. "Adrian," she said carefully, "is everything okay?" He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to know that. Your job is not contingent on how you respond. Whatever you say, whatever you feel, your position here is secure. Do you understand?" Nora's pulse thundered in her ears. "Okay." Adrian took a breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm falling for you, Nora," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the confession. "I've been falling for you since that day in the coffee shop, and working with you these past 4 months has only made it stronger. You're brilliant, compassionate, resilient, everything I admire in a person." Nora's breath caught. "I know the timing is complicated," Adrian continued. "I know you're still healing from your divorce. I know I'm your boss, and that creates a power dynamic we'd have to navigate carefully. But I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. You deserve to know the truth." He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "If you don't feel the same way, that's completely okay. Nothing changes. We continue working together, as we have been. But if there's any part of you that feels what I feel, then I want the chance to explore this, properly, as equals." Nora stared at him, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to her. "I don't understand," she said finally. "You could have anyone. Why me?" Adrian's expression softened. "Because you're not just anyone. You're someone who reads Freire in coffee shops and fights for students no one else believes in. You're someone who faced humiliation and hardship and came out stronger instead of bitter. You're someone who makes me want to be better, to do better." He paused. "But more than any of that, when I'm with you, I feel seen, really seen. Not as a CEO or a philanthropist or a name on a building, just as a person. And that's something I haven't felt in a very long time." Nora felt tears burning in her eyes. "Adrian, You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Take whatever time you need. Think about what you want, what feels right. I'll be here either way." But Nora was done thinking. She'd spent 5 years overthinking everything, second-guessing herself, making herself small to fit someone else's expectations. For once, she was going to trust what she felt. "I feel it too," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been trying not to because it scared me, because the last time I let myself love someone, it destroyed me. But I can't stop feeling this way about you." Adrian's expression transformed relief and joy, mixing with something deeper. "Then, let me do this right," he said. "Let me take you to dinner, as a date, not a work meeting. Let me show you what it looks like when someone sees your worth and cherishes it." Nora nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, okay," Adrian repeated, a smile breaking across his face. "Okay," Nora confirmed, and suddenly they were both laughing through their tears. Adrian reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek, his touch careful and reverent. "I'm not Marcus," he said softly. "I will never make you feel like a burden. I will never blame you for my failures, and I will never, ever take you for granted." "I know," Nora whispered. "You've already shown me that." They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, both of them understanding that something significant had shifted between them. "I should probably go home," Nora finally said, "before I do something inappropriate in my boss's office." Adrian laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Probably wise. How about Saturday? Dinner?" "I'd love that," Nora said. She gathered her things, and Adrian walked her to the elevator like he always did, a routine that now carried new weight. Before the doors closed, he said, "Nora? Yeah? Thank you for giving us a chance. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself," Nora replied. The elevator doors closed, and Nora rode down to the lobby with a smile on her face that felt like it might split her open. For the first time since Marcus had thrown her out into the rain, Nora felt like, maybe, just maybe, her story was beginning instead of ending. The next 6 months were the happiest of Nora's life. She and Adrian took things slowly, carefully building a relationship on the foundation of friendship and mutual respect they'd already established. Their first date was at a quiet Italian restaurant where they talked for 4 hours and only realized it when the staff started stacking chairs around them. Their second date was a walk through Central Park, where Adrian told her about growing up the son of a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to put him through school, and how her death from preventable illness had inspired him to create the foundation. Their third date was dinner at Adrian's penthouse, where Nora cooked, insisting she wanted to do something for him, instead of always being on the receiving end, and they ended up slow dancing in his living room to old jazz records. By the end of the 3rd month, they were inseparable. At work, they maintained professionalism, but everyone knew. Patricia teased them gently, and the rest of the staff seemed genuinely happy for them both. Outside of work, they built a life together. Adrian attended Nora's volunteer tutoring sessions and helped struggling students with math. Nora accompanied Adrian to foundation events and helped him navigate the social aspects he found exhausting. They were partners in every sense of the word, and slowly, carefully, Nora let herself believe in love again. Not the desperate, one-sided love she'd given Marcus, the kind where she'd diminished herself to make him feel bigger. This was something different, something equal, something that made her feel more like herself instead of less. Adrian challenged her intellectually, supported her professionally, and loved her fiercely without ever making her feel owned or obligated. He celebrated her successes as if they were his own. When she gave a presentation at a national education conference, he was in the front row, beaming with pride. When she had a panic attack remembering the night Marcus had kicked her out, Adrian held her and reminded her that she was safe now, that no one would ever hurt her like that again. He showed her what healthy love looked like: respect, communication, partnership, and Nora flourished in it. 10 months after that first meeting in the coffee shop, Adrian took her back to that same place for coffee. They sat at the same table where everything had begun, and Adrian took her hand across the worn wood. "This is where my life changed," he said. "Right here, in this coffee shop, on a random Tuesday afternoon. I saw you reading Frere, looking lost and determined all at once, and something in me knew." "Knew what?" Nora asked softly. "That you were going to matter to me," Adrian said. "I didn't know how much yet, didn't know I'd fall in love with you, but I knew you were important." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Nora's heart stopped. "I'm not proposing," Adrian said quickly, seeing her expression. "Not yet. When I propose, it's going to be bigger than this, more planned. But I wanted to give you something." He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace, a simple gold chain with a small pendant shaped like an open book. "It's beautiful," Nora breathed. "The book is for your love of teaching and learning," Adrian explained. "But it's also a promise. I promise to always see you as the strong, brilliant woman you are. I promise to support your dreams, not ask you to sacrifice them for mine. And I promise that when I do ask you to marry me, because I will, it will be because I can't imagine my life without you." Nora's vision blurred with tears. "Adrian, you don't owe me anything," he said, echoing the words he'd said to her so many months ago. "I just want to be the man who helps you believe in love again." Nora stood, moved around the table, and kissed him. Right there in the coffee shop, in front of strangers and baristas, she kissed him like he was oxygen, and she'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing. "I love you," Nora said. "I love you so much, it terrifies me." "I love you too," Adrian replied, "and I'm going to spend every day proving you can trust that." He fastened the necklace around her neck, and Nora touched the small book pendant, feeling its weight like a promise against her skin. 3 months later, Adrian proposed on the anniversary of the day they'd met, not in the coffee shop, but in the Foundation's scholarship hall, surrounded by photos of the hundreds of students they'd helped together. "This is what we built," he said, gesturing to the wall of faces. "But more than that, we built us. We built a partnership based on respect and shared purpose and love, and I want to keep building with you for the rest of my life." He got down on one knee, and Nora's hands flew to her mouth. "Nora Benson, will you marry me? Will you be my partner, my equal, my home?" "Yes," Nora said through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring he slipped on her finger was perfect, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, something that felt like her, unique, meaningful, beautiful. They married 2 months later in a small ceremony attended only by people who truly mattered. Patricia stood as Nora's maid of honor. Adrian's business partner stood as his best man, and when they exchanged vows, promising to support each other's dreams and stand together through whatever came, Nora felt a peace she'd never known. This was what love was supposed to feel like: safe, equal, empowering. She'd finally found home in another person without losing herself. Or so she thought. The first year of marriage was blissful. Nora and Adrian bought a beautiful townhouse together, not a mansion, but something that felt like them. They filled it with books and art and memories. The foundation continued to grow under their joint leadership. They launched 3 new programs, doubled their scholarship funding, and expanded into 2 more cities. Nora had never been happier or more fulfilled. But happiness, as she would learn, was fragile, and the past had a way of coming back when you least expected it. 18 months into their marriage, Adrian's company, the tech firm he'd built before starting the foundation, faced a crisis. His former business partner, a man named Richard Chen, who Adrian had trusted implicitly, had been embezzling funds for years. Millions of dollars were missing, and when the board discovered it, the scandal exploded. Media descended like vultures, stock prices plummeted, investors panicked, and Adrian, as CEO and majority shareholder, bore the brunt of it all. He'd done nothing wrong, the investigation would eventually prove that, but in the court of public opinion, he was guilty by association. The stress was immense. Adrian worked 18-hour days, met with lawyers and investigators, tried to salvage the company's reputation and keep his employees from losing their jobs. Nora supported him as best she could, managing the foundation in his absence and being there when he came home exhausted and frustrated. But the pressure was relentless. And then, 2 months into the crisis, Marcus resurfaced. Nora was in her office at the foundation when Patricia knocked on her door, her expression troubled. "You need to see this," she said, handing Nora a tablet. On the screen was a news article from a tabloid website, Tech Mogul's Wife's Shady Past, From One Failure to Another. Nora's stomach dropped. She read the article with growing horror. It was an interview with Marcus, her ex-husband, who she hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. He claimed that Nora had used him when he was building his startup, then abandoned him the moment things got hard, to trade up to a richer man. He painted her as a gold digger who'd calculated her way from one wealthy man to another, using her looks and manipulation to climb the social ladder. There were photos, old ones from their marriage, strategically chosen to make her look cold and calculating. Quotes twisted out of context. Lies wrapped in just enough truth to seem credible. "This is insane," Nora breathed. "None of this is true." "I know," Patricia said gently, "but it's out there now, and with Adrian's company already under scrutiny, the media is going to run with this." She was right. By the end of the day, the story had been picked up by 3 major news outlets. Social media was ablaze with speculation. Photos of Nora and Adrian were analyzed, their timelines scrutinized, conspiracy theories spun. When Adrian came home that night, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. "I'm so sorry," Nora said immediately. "Marcus is lying. You know that, right? Everything in that article is—" "I know," Adrian said, his voice tight. "I know it's lies." But there was something in his tone that made Nora's blood run cold. "Adrian," she said carefully. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd rarely seen from him. "My board wants me to make a statement," he said, "distancing the company from this, from us." "What does that mean?" Nora asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "They want me to keep you out of the public eye, stop bringing you to company events, maybe have you step back from the foundation temporarily." The words hit Nora like a physical blow. "Step back from the foundation?" she repeated. "Adrian, that's my job. That's my purpose." "I know," Adrian said, and he sounded miserable. "I told them no. I told them my marriage isn't up for debate. But the pressure is. It's overwhelming, Nora." "So what are you saying?" Nora asked, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I'm saying I don't know what to do," Adrian said. "I'm trying to save a company that employs 3,000 people. I'm trying to protect everything I've built. And every day there's a new story, a new crisis, and now this." He gestured helplessly at his phone, which was probably full of messages about the Marcus interview. "Now this," Nora finished coldly. "You mean me? I'm the crisis now." "That's not what I meant," Adrian said quickly. But the damage was done. For the first time since they'd met, Nora saw doubt in Adrian's eyes when he looked at her, and it terrified her, because she'd seen that look before, right before Marcus had thrown her out into the rain. Have you ever had someone say something they couldn't take back? Let us know in the comments. And if this story is touching your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Nora's life. The media frenzy around Adrian's company intensified, and with it came increased scrutiny of their marriage. More articles appeared, each one digging deeper into Nora's past, twisting her story into something unrecognizable. One outlet ran a timeline, suggesting she'd been seeing Adrian while still married to Marcus. Another claimed she'd been fired from her teaching job for misconduct. A third interviewed people who claimed to have known her in high school and painted her as calculating and cold. All of it was lies or distortions, but the damage was done. Nora watched her reputation, the one she'd rebuilt so carefully over the past 2 years, crumble in real time. And worse, she watched the toll it took on Adrian. He came home later and later each night, his face drawn with exhaustion and stress. Their conversations became shorter, more strained. The easy intimacy they'd always shared felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Nora tried to be supportive. She handled foundation matters without bothering him, kept the house running smoothly, gave him space when he needed it. But no matter what she did, it didn't feel like enough. One night, nearly 3 weeks into the crisis, Nora found Adrian in his home office at 2 in the morning, staring at his laptop screen with bloodshot eyes. "You need to sleep," she said softly from the doorway. "Can't," Adrian replied without looking up. "The board meeting is in 6 hours and I'm not ready." Nora walked into the office and gently closed the laptop. "Adrian, you're going to make yourself sick." "I don't have time to be sick," he said, his voice sharp. "I have 3,000 employees depending on me, investors threatening to pull out, a stock price that's dropped 40% in 3 weeks. I don't have the luxury of rest." "You also don't have the luxury of a breakdown," Nora countered. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Adrian finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her heart ache. "I know you're trying to help," he said, his tone softening slightly, "but I need you to let me handle this." "I am letting you handle it," Nora said. "I just don't want you to handle it alone." "I have to handle it alone," Adrian said, "because every time you're involved, every time we're seen together, it makes things worse." The words hung between them like poison. "What are you saying?" Nora asked quietly. Adrian stood, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "I'm saying that maybe the board is right. Maybe you should step back from public events until this blows over." "And the foundation?" Nora asked, her voice carefully controlled. Maybe a leave of absence would be best." The words felt like a slap. "A leave of absence from the job you gave me?" Nora said, her voice rising. "The work I've poured my heart into for 2 years? It's temporary," Adrian said, "just until the media moves on to the next story." "And what if they don't move on?" Nora demanded. "What if they keep digging, keep twisting everything? Do I just disappear from my own life to make things easier for you?" "That's not fair," Adrian said. "None of this is fair," Nora shot back. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask Marcus to sell lies about me to tabloids. I didn't ask to be turned into some kind of villain in your corporate drama." "I know that," Adrian said, his voice tight. "But I can't control what the media does. I can only control how we respond." "And your response is to hide me?" Nora asked, tears burning in her eyes. "To pretend I don't exist?" "I'm trying to protect you," Adrian said. "By making me invisible?" Nora said. "I've been invisible before, Adrian. I spent 5 years making myself smaller and quieter to accommodate Marcus's ego. I won't do it again." "This is different," Adrian argued. "Is it?" Nora challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels exactly the same. A man I love asking me to sacrifice my identity so he can save face." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I'm not Marcus." "Then stop acting like him," Nora said. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian stared at her, something dark flickering in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or anger. "I should get back to work," he said finally, his voice cold. "Fine," Nora said. "You do that." She left the office, her heart pounding, and went to their bedroom alone. She didn't sleep that night. Neither did Adrian, and the distance between them grew wider. The next day, another story broke. This time, it wasn't about Nora's past. It was about her present. Photos had surfaced of her having lunch with Patricia and 2 male colleagues from the foundation. The photos were innocent, a working lunch to discuss the scholarship program, but the headlines weren't. "CEO's wife cozy with male colleagues, while husband fights for company." Is Nora Cole following a pattern? The implications were clear and disgusting. Nora was at the foundation office when Patricia showed her the article, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Nora felt her composure crack. "This is insane," she said, her voice shaking. "That was a work lunch. You were there. It was completely professional." "I know," Patricia said, her expression sympathetic. "But they're not interested in the truth. They're interested in the story that sells." Nora's phone rang. "Adrian," she answered. "I saw it." "We need to talk," Adrian said, his voice tense. "Can you come home? I'm in the middle of reviewing scholarship applications." "Now, Nora, please." The please sounded like it cost him something, so Nora agreed. The drive home felt like traveling to her own execution. She found Adrian in the living room, standing by the window with his back to her. His posture was rigid, controlled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Adrian?" she said softly. He turned, and the look on his face made her stomach drop. "My legal team wants me to issue a statement," he said without preamble. "About our marriage. About you." "What kind of statement?" Nora asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "One that addresses the allegations," Adrian said. "That clarifies the timeline of our relationship, your employment at the foundation, everything." "That sounds reasonable," Nora said carefully. "They also want to include information about your divorce from Marcus," Adrian continued. "The real story, to counter his lies." Nora felt ice settle in her stomach. "That's private, Adrian. That's my past, my pain. I don't want it dissected in public." "I know," Adrian said. "But if we don't control the narrative, someone else will." "So my trauma becomes collateral damage?" Nora asked. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" Nora interrupted. "Because it sounds like you're asking me to expose the worst moments of my life so people will stop questioning your judgment in marrying me." Adrian's expression hardened. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Nora laughed bitterly. "Nothing about this is fair, but I'm the one being asked to sacrifice everything. My privacy, my job, my reputation, all so your precious company doesn't lose a few more points in the stock market." "That company employs 3,000 people," Adrian said, his voice rising. 3,000 families who depend on those jobs to survive. This isn't about ego or stock prices. It's about real people's livelihoods." "And what about my livelihood?" Nora demanded. "What about the work I do at the foundation, the students who depend on those scholarships? Do they not matter?" "Of course they matter," Adrian said. "But right now, the foundation's future depends on the company's survival. If the company goes under, the funding for the foundation goes with it." "So it all comes back to money," Nora said quietly. "It comes back to reality," Adrian corrected. "And the reality is that we're in a crisis, and we need to make difficult choices." "We," Nora said, "or me, because it seems like I'm the only one being asked to make sacrifices here." Adrian's expression shifted to something Nora had never seen before, cold, distant, almost calculating. "What do you want me to say, Nora?" he asked. "That this isn't hard for me? That I'm not sacrificing anything? I'm working 20 hours a day, fighting to save something I built from the ground up, dealing with betrayal from someone I trusted, and watching my personal life become tabloid fodder." "And whose fault is that?" Nora asked, the words out before she could stop them. Adrian went very still. "What did you say?" Nora knew she should back down, apologize, but something in her, some wounded, angry part that had been silenced for too long, pushed forward. "I said, whose fault is this?" she repeated. "You're the one who trusted Richard Chen despite red flags. You're the one who built a company culture where this kind of fraud could happen. You're the one whose business decisions created this mess." "So this is my fault?" Adrian asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I didn't say that." "You just did," Adrian interrupted. "You just blamed me for being betrayed, for trusting the wrong person." "That's not what I meant," Nora said, panic rising as she realized how badly she'd miscalculated. "I'm just saying that maybe, instead of asking me to disappear, you should focus on the actual problem." "The actual problem?" Adrian repeated. "You mean me?" "I mean the company, the embezzlement, the—" "I know what you meant," Adrian said, and his tone was ice. "And maybe you're right. Maybe this is all my fault. Maybe trusting people is my fatal flaw." The way he looked at her when he said it made Nora's blood run cold. "Adrian, maybe everyone who warned me was right," he continued, his voice getting louder. "Maybe I was a fool to think this would work. To think that—" He stopped himself, but the damage was already done. "To think what?" Nora asked, her voice shaking. "Say it." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Nothing. Forget it." "No," Nora said, stepping closer. "You started it. Finish it." "To think what, Adrian?" His eyes met hers, and what she saw there broke her heart. Doubt, suspicion, the same look Marcus had given her before he'd thrown her out. Maybe they were right about you, Adrian said, the words quiet but devastating. Nora felt the world tilt. Those words, those exact words. Marcus had said something similar the night he'd kicked her out. Maybe you are just dead weight. And now Adrian, the man who'd promised to never make her feel that way, who'd sworn he wasn't, Marcus had just echoed the same sentiment. The silence that followed was absolute. Nora stood there, watching the man she loved realize what he'd just said, watching the horror dawn on his face as he understood the magnitude of his words. Nora, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, Nora said, her voice eerily calm. Maybe not consciously, maybe not intentionally, but some part of you meant it. Some part of you wondered if they're right, if I'm just a burden, if I'm the problem. That's not true, Adrian said, taking a step toward her. Nora took a step back. Don't. Nora, please. I was angry and exhausted and I said something I don't mean. But you said it, Nora interrupted, tears streaming down her face. And I've heard it before. I know what comes next. I'm not going to kick you out, Adrian said desperately. I'm not Marcus. I would never. You just did, Nora said. Maybe not physically, but you just told me that maybe everyone who doubts me is right. That's the same thing. She walked past him toward the stairs. Where are you going? Adrian asked. To pack, Nora said without turning around. Nora, don't do this, Adrian called after her. Let's talk about this. Let me explain. But Nora didn't stop. She went upstairs to their bedroom and pulled out the same suitcase she'd used the night Marcus had thrown her out. The sight of it made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. History repeating itself. Different man, same ending. She packed methodically, efficiently, the way she'd learned to do when your world was falling apart and you needed to focus on the practical to keep from screaming. Adrian appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Please don't leave, he said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Maybe not, Nora said, continuing to pack. But you said it anyway, and that tells me everything I need to know. Which is what? Adrian asked. Nora stopped and looked at him directly. That when things get hard, when the pressure mounts, you'll doubt me, she said. That your first instinct is to question whether I'm worth the trouble, whether maybe all the people calling me a gold digger are right. That's not my first instinct, Adrian protested. It was tonight, Nora said, and it will be again, because that's what happens when love isn't strong enough to withstand external pressure. She zipped the suitcase closed. I thought you were different from Marcus, she said quietly. I thought you saw me, really saw me, in a way he never did. But tonight, you showed me that when it matters most, you're just as quick to believe the worst. That's not fair, Adrian said, his voice breaking. You're not being fair. Nora picked up her suitcase. You want to talk about fair? She asked. It's not fair that I'm being crucified in the media for crimes I didn't commit. It's not fair that my ex-husband gets to weaponize our failed marriage against me. It's not fair that the man I love just told me that maybe everyone who thinks I'm a user is right. She walked to the door where Adrian stood, blocking her path. Move, she said. Nora, please. Move, Adrian. The use of his full name instead of a pet name seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stepped aside. Nora walked past him, down the stairs, and toward the front door. Where will you go? Adrian called after her, and she could hear the desperation in his voice. Somewhere I'm not a burden, Nora said. She opened the door and stepped out into the night. It wasn't raining this time. That felt significant somehow, like the universe acknowledging that this heartbreak was different from the last one. Marcus had kicked her out in anger and contempt. Adrian had driven her away with doubt and fear. She didn't know which hurt more. Nora drove to the one place she knew she could go, Patricia's house. Her friend opened the door in pajamas, took one look at Nora's tear-stained face and the suitcase, and pulled her inside without a word. I left him, Nora said once they were sitting in Patricia's living room, her voice hollow. What happened? Patricia asked gently. Nora told her everything, the fight, the accusations, the words that couldn't be taken back. He said, maybe they were right about me, Nora finished, just like Marcus did. And I can't do this again. I can't be with someone who'll turn on me the moment things get difficult. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Can I say something you might not want to hear? She finally asked. Nora nodded. Adrian is wrong for what he said, Patricia began. There's no defending that. Those words were cruel and unfair, and he hurt you deeply. But, and please hear me out, he's also been under unimaginable pressure for weeks. He's exhausted, scared, and overwhelmed. That doesn't excuse. I'm not excusing it, Patricia interrupted gently. I'm explaining it. There's a difference. What Marcus did to you was sustained cruelty. He spent years diminishing you, blaming you for his failures, and finally kicked you out when he couldn't use you anymore. That was who he was as a person. What Adrian did was say something terrible in a moment of weakness. Nora shook her head. It doesn't matter if it was a moment or a pattern, the words still hurt the same. I know they do, Patricia said, and you have every right to be hurt, to be angry, to need space. But I've worked with Adrian for almost 10 years, and I've watched him with you for 2 years. That man loves you more than anything. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Then why did he say it? Nora asked, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Because he's human, Patricia said. Because people sometimes say the worst possible thing when they're scared of losing everything. Not as an excuse, but as an explanation. She took Nora's hand. I'm not telling you to forgive him or go back. That's your decision. I'm just saying that maybe the difference between Marcus and Adrian isn't that Adrian will never hurt you. It's that Adrian will actually feel remorse when he does. Nora pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't tell the difference between remorse and manipulation anymore, she said quietly. Marcus always apologized too. He always promised to do better, and then he'd do it again. But did Marcus ever actually change? Patricia asked. Did he ever back up his apologies with action? No, Nora admitted. Then wait and see if Adrian does, Patricia said. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Stay here as long as you need. Take time to think, but don't close the door completely just because you're afraid. Nora wanted to argue, to insist that this was different, that she was done giving chances to men who hurt her, but she was too exhausted to fight anymore. Can I just go to bed? She asked. Of course, Patricia said, standing. Guest room is all yours. Clean towels in the bathroom. Stay as long as you need. Nora went to the guest room, closed the door, and finally let herself fall apart. She cried for the marriage she thought she'd had, for the man she thought she'd known, for the future they'd been building that now felt like it was crumbling. And she cried for herself for being in this position again, for having to start over again, for being so tired of being strong. Eventually, exhaustion won, and she fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, Nora woke to dozens of missed calls and texts from Adrian. She couldn't bring herself to read them. Instead, she got up, showered, and tried to figure out what to do next. She couldn't go back to the foundation, not yet. Being around Adrian's world felt impossible right now. She couldn't stay with Patricia indefinitely. That wasn't fair to her friend. She needed a plan, a purpose, something that was hers and hers alone. Nora opened her laptop and started searching for volunteer opportunities, not at organizations connected to the foundation or Adrian's company, but somewhere completely separate. She found a children's shelter on the other side of the city that needed volunteers for their after-school tutoring program. Perfect. She called and scheduled an orientation for that afternoon. Then she started looking for apartments, small, affordable ones that she could manage on whatever income she could scrape together from tutoring gigs and part-time work. She wasn't going to be dependent on anyone ever again. Not financially, not emotionally, not in any way. Patricia knocked on the guest room door around noon. I made lunch, she said, and before you say you're not hungry, you need to eat. Nora joined her in the kitchen, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. Adrian called the office this morning, Patricia finally said. He sounded destroyed. Don't, Nora said quietly. I'm not trying to guilt you, Patricia said. I'm just telling you what I observed. He asked me to tell you that he's not going to push, not going to harass you with calls and texts. He'll give you space, but he wants you to know he's sorry. He already said that, Nora said. Last night, right before I left. And did you believe him? Patricia asked. Nora thought about that. I believed that he regretted the words. I don't know if he regrets the doubt behind them. Patricia nodded. That's fair. They finished lunch, and Nora went to her volunteer orientation at the children's shelter. The shelter was nothing like the polished, well-funded foundation. It was housed in a converted church with outdated facilities and a staff that was clearly overworked and underfunded. But the kids were bright and eager and reminded Nora why she'd become a teacher in the first place. She threw herself into the work, tutoring elementary school students in reading and math, helping them with homework, just being present for children who needed stability and attention. It felt good, real, like she was building something that belonged to her. The first week passed in a blur of work and careful avoidance. Nora stayed with Patricia, looked at apartments, and spent every afternoon at the shelter. She didn't answer Adrian's calls or read his texts. She couldn't, not yet. But on the 8th day after she'd left, something changed. Nora was working with a 7-year-old named Maya, helping her sound out words in a picture book when the shelter director approached. "Nora, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked. "Of course," Nora said, marking Maya's place in the book. "I'll be right back, sweetie." The director led her to the small office and closed the door. "I want you to know that this isn't easy for me to say," the director began, "but we received a substantial anonymous donation this morning, enough to fund our after-school program for the next 5 years. Nora's heart sank. "Let me guess, it came from the Cole Foundation." The director looked surprised. "How did you know?" "Because my husband, my estranged husband, runs the Cole Foundation," Nora said, feeling anger rise in her chest. "And apparently, he can't resist trying to control my life even when I've explicitly asked for space." "I don't think that's what this is," the director said gently. "The donation came with very specific instructions. It's to fund the program, yes, but it also includes a provision that we hire you as our permanent education coordinator. Full-time position, competitive salary, complete autonomy over program design." Nora stared at her. "What?" "The donor, whoever it is, specified that you should have full control over curriculum, staffing, and implementation. No oversight from the foundation. No strings attached, except that you're in charge." Nora sank into a chair, her mind reeling. This wasn't control. This was the opposite. Adrian was giving her exactly what she'd said she needed, a purpose that was hers alone, work that didn't depend on him or his resources. "There's more," the director said, handing Nora an envelope. "This came with the donation. It's addressed to you." Nora took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Adrian's handwriting. "Nora, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I broke your trust in the worst possible way, but I want you to know that I've spent every moment since you left understanding exactly how badly I failed you. You were right. When the pressure mounted, I doubted you. I let fear and stress make me question the one person who's never given me reason to doubt. I let the noise from outside become louder than the truth I knew in my heart. I said words I can never take back, words that echo the worst moment of your past, words that betrayed everything I promised you. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I'm writing to give you what you deserve, work that's yours, purpose that no one can take from you, and the freedom to build a life that doesn't depend on me. This donation is not about control. It's about making sure you have the resources to do what you were meant to do without any obligations to me or the foundation. If you take this position, you'll answer to no one but yourself and the kids you serve. If you don't want it, the funding remains anyway. The shelter needs it regardless. I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness. I'm trying to show you that I hear what you said, that I understand what you need. And I'm trying to do what I should have done from the beginning, put your dreams, your purpose, your well-being ahead of everything else. I love you. I will always love you. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I made you doubt that, even for a moment. Adrian. By the time Nora finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. "Are you okay?" the director asked gently. Nora wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Can I have some time to think about the position?" she asked. "Of course," the director said. "Take all the time you need." Nora left the shelter in a daze, Adrian's letter clutched in her hand. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd expected him to show up begging for forgiveness, to use his money and influence to force his way back into her life. Instead, he'd given her the one thing she needed most, the ability to stand on her own. But it didn't erase what he'd said, didn't undo the hurt. Did it? That night, Nora finally opened the texts Adrian had sent over the past week. There were dozens of them, but they weren't desperate pleas or attempts at manipulation. They were simple updates. "I met with the board today, told them our marriage is not up for negotiation. Richard Chen was arrested. The investigation is moving forward. I'm stepping down as CEO. David will take over day-to-day operations. Started seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I let external pressure poison what mattered most. Saw a kid at the park reading one of the books you recommended to me. Made me think of you. I miss you, but I understand why you need space. Each message was a glimpse into what Adrian was doing, how he was changing. Not grand gestures, just consistent action. The last message was from earlier that day. I hope the shelter position is what you're looking for. You deserve to build something that's entirely yours. If you take it, I'll stay out of your way. If you don't, I'll understand. Either way, I'm proud of you. Nora set down her phone and stared at the ceiling of Patricia's guest room. She thought about what Patricia had said, that the difference between Marcus and Adrian might not be that Adrian would never hurt her, but that he'd feel genuine remorse when he did. Marcus had apologized with words, but his actions had always betrayed those words. He'd promised to change and never did. Adrian had apologized with words, but he was backing them up with action. He wasn't pressuring her or trying to control the situation. He was giving her space and resources and demonstrating change. The question was that enough? Could she forgive him? More importantly, could she trust him again? Nora didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time since that horrible night, she felt like maybe, just maybe, finding that answer was possible. The next morning, Nora called the shelter director and accepted the position, not because of Adrian's donation, but because the work was exactly what she wanted to do, what she was meant to do. She'd start in 2 weeks, which gave her time to find an apartment and prepare for this new chapter. She also did something she hadn't done in over a week. She called Adrian. He answered on the first ring, his voice cautious. "Nora? I took the job at the shelter," she said without preamble. "I'm glad," Adrian said, and he sounded like he meant it. "You're going to do incredible work there. Thank you for the donation," Nora said, "and for the conditions you put on it, for giving me autonomy." "You never needed my permission to be autonomous," Adrian said quietly. "I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you did." Nora took a breath. "I need you to understand something." "Okay. What you said that night, it broke something in me," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening. "Because it wasn't just the words. It was that after 2 years of showing you who I am, of building a life together, your first instinct under pressure was to doubt me." "I know," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I hate myself for it." "I don't want you to hate yourself," Nora said. "I want you to understand why it hurt so much, why I can't just come back and pretend it didn't happen." "I do understand," Adrian said, "and I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you to believe that I'm working on being better, that I'm seeing a therapist, that I'm learning to handle pressure without lashing out at the people I love." "Are you really stepping down as CEO?" Nora asked. "Yes," Adrian confirmed. "I'll stay on as chairman, but David is taking over day-to-day operations. I realized that I built that company to prove I was worth something, to prove I wasn't the poor kid whose mother died of preventable illness, but I already proved that. And in the process, I almost lost what actually makes life worth living." Nora felt her careful composure cracking. "Adrian, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know that I'm not the same man who said those words to you. Or maybe I am, but I'm working every day to be better." "I need time," Nora said. "Take all the time you need," Adrian said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Even if I decide I can't come back?" Nora asked. There was a long pause, and when Adrian spoke again, his voice was rough with unshed tears. "Even then," he said, "because I love you, Nora, and real love means wanting you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me." Nora closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "I have to go," she said. "Okay," Adrian replied. "Take care of yourself." "You too," Nora whispered. She ended the call and sat there on Patricia's couch, holding her phone and crying, because she still loved him. God help her, she still loved him. But love wasn't always enough. Sometimes trust, once broken, couldn't be fully repaired, and Nora didn't know yet if theirs could be. If this story is moving you, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because the ending is going to determine whether love is stronger than the words that almost destroyed it. 3 months passed. Nora threw herself into her new role at the children's shelter with an intensity that surprised even her. She redesigned the entire after-school program, hired 2 additional tutors, and created a mentorship initiative that paired struggling students with college volunteers. The work was exhausting and fulfilling in equal measure. She found an apartment, a small 1-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy but entirely hers. She furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing each piece deliberately instead of just filling space. This was her sanctuary, her fresh start, and for the first time in her life, she was building something that didn't depend on anyone else. She stayed in touch with Patricia, who gave her updates on the foundation without being asked. The scholarship program was thriving under new leadership. The media storm around Adrian's company had finally died down. Richard Chen had been convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Life was moving forward, but Nora couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She told herself it was just adjustment, that she needed more time to heal, to remember who she was without a man defining her. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she'd think about Adrian, about the way he used to make her coffee exactly how she liked it, about the way he'd read to her when she had trouble sleeping, about the look in his eyes when he'd told her she made him want to be better, about all the ways he'd shown up before that one terrible night when he hadn't. She missed him. But missing someone and trusting them again were 2 different things. 4 months after leaving, Nora was at the shelter helping Maya, the 7-year-old, who'd become her favorite student, when an unfamiliar man entered the tutoring room. He was well dressed but not flashy, maybe in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. "Miss Benson," he said, "I'm David Park. I worked with Adrian." Nora's heart rate spiked. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," David assured her quickly. "Physically, at least. I'm not here on his behalf. Actually, he doesn't know I'm here at all. I came because I think there are things you should know." Nora glanced at Maya, who was engrossed in her book. "Can we talk outside?" They stepped into the hallway, and David pulled out his phone. "Adrian would kill me for showing you this," he said, "but I think you deserve to see what he's been doing." He showed her a series of photos. Adrian at a homeless shelter, serving food. Adrian at a community center, teaching financial literacy to low-income families. Adrian sitting on the floor of what looked like a group therapy session, his expression open and vulnerable. "He's been volunteering 20 hours a week," David explained. "No cameras, no press releases, just showing up and doing the work." "Why are you telling me this?" Nora asked. David put his phone away. "Because I've known Adrian for 15 years. I watched him build an empire, and I watched him become someone I barely recognized, someone who measured his worth by his net worth." He paused. "But in the past 4 months, I've watched him become someone different, someone better. He's in therapy twice a week. He's completely restructured his priorities. He turned down 3 major business opportunities because they conflicted with his volunteer commitments." "That still doesn't explain why you're here," Nora said. David met her eyes. "Because yesterday, he told me he's selling the company." Nora's breath caught. "What?" "He's selling his majority stake," David confirmed. "Not the foundation that's separate and fully funded, but the tech company, the thing he built from nothing. He's selling it and using the proceeds to create a trust that funds educational and social programs." "Why?" Nora asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Because he said he spent years building something that almost cost him everything that mattered," David said. "And he doesn't want to be that person anymore." He pulled out an envelope from his jacket. "He's been writing to you," David said, handing it to her. "1 letter every week. He doesn't send them because he promised to give you space, but I thought you should know they exist." Nora took the envelope with trembling hands. "He loves you, Nora," David said quietly. "I've never seen anyone love someone the way he loves you, and I think he deserves the chance to show you he's changed." "He hurt me," Nora said, her voice breaking. "I know," David said, "and I'm not saying you have to forgive him. I'm just saying maybe you should see the whole picture before you decide." He left, and Nora stood in the hallway clutching the envelope, her mind spinning. That night, Nora sat in her apartment and opened the envelope. Inside were 16 letters, each one dated, each one addressed to her. She started with the first one, written the day after she'd left. "Nora, I know I have no right to write to you. I know you need space, and I'm going to give you that. But I also need to process what I've done. And writing to you, even if you never read this, helps me think clearly. I spent today replaying our fight over and over, Every word I said. The look on your face when I said, maybe they were right about you. The way you packed that suitcase with the same quiet dignity you had the night Marcus threw you out. I realized something. I did to you exactly what he did. I made you feel like you were the problem when the real problem was my own fear and inadequacy. I'm sorry, those words aren't enough, but they're all I have right now. I love you. I will always love you, and I will spend every day trying to become the man who deserves you. Adrian. Nora's vision blurred with tears. She read the second letter, dated a week later. Nora, I started therapy today. My therapist asked me why I said what I said to you. I gave her all the excuses, the stress, the exhaustion, the pressure from the board. She asked me what I was really afraid of. I realized I was afraid that everyone was right, that you were too good for me, that eventually you'd wake up and realize you'd married down, that I wasn't worth the trouble you were going through because of me. So when the pressure mounted, I pushed you away first, before you could leave on your own. It's the same thing I've done my whole life, pushed people away before they could reject me. But you never rejected me. You loved me. And I threw that away because I was too broken to believe I deserved it. I'm working on that. It's going to take time, but I'm committed to the work. Adrian. Nora read through all 16 letters, each one a window into Adrian's journey. He wrote about his therapy sessions, about confronting the childhood trauma of losing his parents and being bounced through foster care, about recognizing patterns of self-sabotage and fear of abandonment. He wrote about stepping down as CEO, about realizing that his obsession with success had been about proving his worth rather than actually creating value. He wrote about volunteering at the homeless shelter and meeting a man who'd lost everything but still had more grace and kindness than Adrian had shown in years. He wrote about the foundation, about how watching the students they'd helped together reminded him of why he'd started it in the first place. And in every letter, he wrote about missing her, not in a desperate, needy way, but with a quiet honesty that broke Nora's heart. The final letter, written just 3 days earlier, was different from the others. Nora, this will be my last letter, not because I'm giving up, but because I've realized that writing to you every week has become about making myself feel better rather than actually respecting your need for space. You asked me to show you I've changed, not just tell you, and part of that change is learning when to step back instead of pushing forward. I want you to know that I'm selling the company. It's time. I built it for the wrong reasons, and holding on to it would be holding on to a version of myself I don't want to be anymore. I'm going to focus on the foundation and on the direct service work I've been doing. It turns out that teaching financial literacy to families struggling to make ends meet is more fulfilling than closing million-dollar deals ever was. I'm not doing this to win you back. I'm doing it because you helped me see what actually matters. And even if we never find our way back to each other, I'll always be grateful for that. I love you, Nora. I hope you're happy. I hope you're building the life you deserve. And I hope someday you can forgive me. Adrian. Nora set down the last letter and sat in the quiet of her apartment, tears streaming down her face. 4 months ago, she'd left because she couldn't trust that Adrian's apology was real, that he wouldn't just say the right words and then fall back into old patterns. But these letters, they weren't just words. They were a roadmap of actual change, evidence of someone doing the hard work of becoming better. The question was it enough? Could she trust him again? More importantly, did she want to? The next day, Nora did something she hadn't done in 4 months. She went to the Cole Foundation. Patricia was surprised but not shocked to see her. "He's in his office," she said. "But Nora, be gentle with him. He's not the same man you left." "I know," Nora said. "That's why I'm here." She walked to Adrian's office, the one they used to share, planning programs and dreaming about impact, and knocked on the door. "Come in," Adrian's voice called out. Nora opened the door and stepped inside. Adrian was at his desk, reviewing what looked like grant proposals. When he looked up and saw her, he went completely still. "Nora," he said, standing slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might make her disappear. She'd spent the entire morning planning what to say, rehearsing the words, but now, looking at him, everything she'd prepared evaporated. He looked different, thinner, like he hadn't been eating enough. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But there was also something else, a softness, a vulnerability that seemed new. "I read your letters," Nora said. Adrian's eyes widened. David, don't be mad at him, Nora said quickly. He was trying to help. I'm not mad, Adrian said. I don't know what I am. They stood there, an ocean of hurt and hope between them. You're selling the company, Nora said. Yes, Adrian confirmed. The sale finalizes next month. Why? Adrian was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I built that company to prove I wasn't the poor foster kid whose mother died because we couldn't afford health care, he said. I built it to show the world I was worth something, but in the process, I almost destroyed the one relationship that actually made me feel worthy. He took a step closer. I don't need $1 billion company to prove my value anymore. I'd rather spend my time doing work that matters, with people who matter. Even if that's not with you, even if I've lost that chance, I want to be someone worthy of having had you in my life. Nora felt tears slip down her cheeks. What you said that night, she began. It broke me, Adrian, because it was the same doubt, the same accusation I'd heard from Marcus. And I thought you were different. I thought you saw me. I do see you, Adrian said, his voice breaking. And that night, I failed you. I let fear and pressure cloud what I knew in my heart. But I see you now, Nora. I see your strength, your compassion, your resilience. I see everything you sacrificed to support Marcus, everything you've built since then. I see how you've transformed that shelter's program in 4 months. I see you. Then why did you doubt me? Nora asked. The question that had haunted her for months, finally voiced. Adrian's face crumpled. Because I doubted myself. I thought if the whole world was saying you were too good for me, it must be true. And I was so terrified of losing you that I pushed you away first. It's the most cowardly thing I've ever done. He took another step closer. I don't have an excuse that makes it okay, he said, but I have an explanation and I have a promise. The explanation is that I was broken in ways I didn't understand. The promise is that I'm doing the work to heal those broken places, so I never hurt you like that again. Nora looked at the man she'd loved, the man who'd hurt her, the man who seemed to be genuinely transformed by that hurt. How do I know this is real? She asked. How do I know you won't doubt me again the next time things get hard? You don't, Adrian said honestly. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I'll never say something hurtful when I'm scared or overwhelmed, but I can promise that I'll own it when I do, that I'll go to therapy and work on the underlying issues, that I'll choose you over my fear every single time. He pulled out his phone and opened a calendar app, turning it to show her. Therapy every Tuesday and Thursday, he said. Men's support group every Wednesday. Volunteer work at the shelter Monday and Friday. Foundation work the rest of the time. This is my life now. This is the structure I've built to make sure I stay accountable. Nora looked at the calendar, at the evidence of sustained effort. Show me, she said quietly. Show you what? Adrian asked. Show me you've changed. Don't just tell me. Show me. Adrian's expression shifted to something determined and hopeful. Okay, he said. What do you need? Time, Nora said. I need time to see if this change is real or if it's just temporary until you get me back. How much time? Adrian asked. I don't know, Nora admitted. But I'm not moving back in. I'm not picking up where we left off. If we do this, we do it slowly. We date. We rebuild trust, step by step. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me, Adrian said. And if I decide I can't do this? Nora asked. If the hurt is too deep to overcome? Pain flashed across Adrian's face, but his voice was steady. Then I'll accept that, because I love you enough to want you to be happy, even if that means being happy without me. Nora took a shaky breath. Okay, she said. Let's try. They started slowly. Coffee once a week, in public places where the pressure was minimal. They talked about everything except their relationship at first, the shelter program, the foundation, books they were reading, the city changing around them. It was strange and familiar all at once, like learning to know each other again from scratch. Adrian never pushed for more, never pressured her to move faster than she was comfortable with. When Nora had a panic attack one night, triggered by a news story about corporate fraud, Adrian talked her through it over the phone without once suggesting he come over. You're safe, he said, his voice calm and steady. You're in your apartment, your space. No one is going to hurt you. Just breathe with me. When Nora's birthday came around, Adrian didn't buy her expensive gifts. Instead, he made a donation in her name, to the shelter's reading program. "I know jewelry or flowers would be more traditional," he said when he told her, "but I thought you'd rather have 20 kids receive books." He was right. 6 weeks into their tentative reconciliation, Adrian invited Nora to attend one of his therapy sessions. "My therapist suggested it," he said, "only if you're comfortable, but she thinks it might help you understand the work I'm doing." Nora agreed. Sitting in that therapist's office, listening to Adrian talk openly about his childhood trauma, his fear of abandonment, the ways he'd self-sabotaged throughout his life, it was illuminating. This wasn't a man making excuses. This was a man genuinely trying to understand himself so he could be better. "Nora," the therapist said toward the end of the session, "is there anything you'd like to say to Adrian? Anything you need him to hear?" Nora thought about it. "I need you to understand that trust isn't rebuilt with words," she said finally. "It's rebuilt with consistency, with showing up over and over, even when it's hard, even when I'm not grateful or warm, even when I'm still angry about what happened." "I understand," Adrian sighed, meeting her eyes. "And I'm committed to that, for however long it takes. And I need you to understand that there might come a day when I realize I can't get past what you said," Nora continued, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "That the hurt goes too deep, and if that day comes, you have to let me go. Really let me go. Not with guilt trips or grand gestures or attempts to change my mind." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "If that day comes, I'll let you go, because loving you means respecting what you need, even if it breaks my heart." The therapist watched them both with a gentle expression. "That's a very mature understanding of love. And Nora, what do you need from yourself in this process?" Nora was surprised by the question. "What do I need from myself?" "Yes," the therapist said. "You've outlined what you need from Adrian, but what do you need to give yourself permission to do?" Nora thought about that. "I need permission to still be angry sometimes, to have bad days where I remember what he said and can't get past it. I need permission to take as long as I need without feeling guilty about it." "You have that permission," the therapist said. "Healing isn't linear, and rebuilding trust after betrayal is a process that doesn't follow a timeline." 3 months into their reconciliation, Nora and Adrian attended a foundation gala together. It was the first public event they'd been to as a couple since the separation, and Nora was nervous. "We don't have to do this," Adrian said as they stood outside the venue. "If it's too much, we can leave right now." "I want to," Nora said, taking his hand. "I'm just worried about what people will say." "Let them say whatever they want," Adrian said firmly. "The only opinion that matters is yours." They walked in together, and the room did exactly what Nora expected. Conversations paused, heads turned, whispers started. But Adrian kept his hand on the small of her back, steady and reassuring. Patricia appeared almost immediately, greeting them both warmly. "You look beautiful, Nora. And Adrian, you clean up nice when you actually sleep." The tension broke, and they both laughed. Throughout the evening, Nora watched Adrian work the room. He was different from before, less focused on impressing donors, more focused on genuine connection. He spent 20 minutes talking to a scholarship recipient about her college plans. He listened more than he talked. He introduced Nora not as "my wife," but as the brilliant woman who designed our entire scholarship program. Equal, partner, not accessory. Midway through the evening, a woman Nora didn't recognize approached them. "Mr. Cole, I'm Jennifer Morrison from the Tribune. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about the recent sale of your company." Adrian's expression remained pleasant but firm. "This is a foundation event, not a business interview. If you'd like to schedule something formal, you can contact my office." "Just one question," the reporter pressed. "Is it true you sold the company because of marital issues?" Nora felt Adrian tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. "I sold the company because I wanted to focus my energy on work that creates direct social impact," he said. "My marriage is personal, and I don't discuss it with the press. Now, if you'll excuse us." He guided Nora away, his hand still steady on her back. "You handled that well," Nora said once they were out of earshot. "I've learned that some battles aren't worth fighting," Adrian replied. "And the press will write whatever they want, regardless of what I say. The only people who need to know the truth are the ones who matter." Later that night, as Adrian drove her back to her apartment, Nora felt something shift inside her. She'd been watching him for 3 months, looking for cracks in the facade, waiting for the old Adrian to resurface. But he hadn't. Every day, every interaction, every choice, he'd shown her that this change was real. "Do you want to come up for coffee?" Nora asked, when they pulled up to her building. Adrian looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Nora said. It was the first time he'd been to her apartment. He looked around with obvious interest, taking in the space she'd created for herself. "It's very you," he said, touching the spine of a book on her shelf. "Warm, thoughtful, full of things that matter." Nora made coffee, and they sat on her small couch, a respectful distance between them. "Can I ask you something?" Nora said. "Anything. Do you regret selling the company?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "No. I thought I might, but I don't. I'm happier now than I was when I was running it. The work I'm doing at the homeless shelter, the financial literacy classes, even the therapy, it all feels more meaningful than any deal I ever closed." "And if we don't work out," Nora asked, "will you regret it then?" Adrian turned to look at her directly. "Nora, even if we don't end up together, you changed my life for the better. You helped me see that I was chasing the wrong things, measuring success by the wrong metrics. I'll never regret that." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm still scared." "Of what?" Adrian asked gently. "Of letting you back in and having you hurt me again," Nora admitted. "Of being wrong about you changing. Of being the fool who gave someone a second chance they didn't deserve." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Those are all valid fears, and I can't promise I'll never hurt you again. People who love each other sometimes hurt each other, even without meaning to." He shifted closer, but still didn't touch her. "But I can promise that I'll own it when I do, that I won't blame you for my shortcomings, that I'll do the work to understand why, and make sure it doesn't become a pattern. That's the difference between who I am now and who I was that night." Nora looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. He had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. And maybe that was enough. Maybe love wasn't about finding someone who would never hurt you. Maybe it was about finding someone who would do the work to be better when they did. "I think I'm ready," Nora said softly. "Ready for what?" Adrian asked. "To forgive you," Nora said. "Not forget, I don't think I'll ever forget, but forgive. And to try again, really try." Adrian's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Nora said. "But we still take it slow. We still rebuild step by step." "Whatever you need," Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. Nora reached out and took his hand, the first time she'd initiated touch in 4 months. "I need you to keep showing up," she said. "I need you to keep doing the work, even when it's hard. I need you to choose me over your fear, over external pressure, over everything." "I will," Adrian promised. "Every single day." Nora leaned forward and rested her head on his shoulder, and Adrian wrapped his arm around her carefully, like she was something precious. They sat like that for a long time, two broken people who'd found each other, lost each other, and were finding their way back. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better, it was real. 6 months after that night, Nora and Adrian stood in front of a small gathering of friends and family and renewed their vows. Not because the first ones weren't real, but because they wanted to honor how far they'd come. Patricia stood as Nora's witness. David stood as Adrian's. And this time, when they made their promises, they knew exactly what they were promising. "I vow to choose you," Adrian said, his voice steady and sure. "Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. I vow to do the work of understanding myself so I don't hurt you out of my own brokenness. I vow to see you, always, as the remarkable woman you are. I vow to trust you," Nora said, tears streaming down her face. "Even when I'm scared, I vow to give you grace when you stumble, knowing that growth isn't linear. I vow to build a life with you where we're both stronger together than we ever were apart." When they kissed, it felt like a new beginning and a continuation all at once. After the small ceremony, as they stood in the garden of the venue talking to guests, Marcus appeared. Nora hadn't invited him, hadn't even told him about the vow renewal. But there he was, looking smaller somehow, less significant than the monster she'd built him up to be in her mind. "Nora," he said, approaching cautiously, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Adrian immediately positioned himself protectively beside her, but Nora touched his arm gently. "It's okay," she said. They stepped away from the crowd, Marcus keeping a respectful distance. "I saw the news about the vow renewal," he said. "I wanted to. I needed to apologize." Nora raised an eyebrow. "For which part? Kicking me out? Blaming me for your failures? Or selling lies about me to the tabloids?" Marcus flinched. "All of it. I was angry and bitter, and I took it out on you because it was easier than facing my own shortcomings." "Yes, you did," Nora said simply. "I know my apology doesn't change anything," Marcus continued, "and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I see now how wrong I was. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I destroyed it." Nora looked at her ex-husband and felt nothing. Not anger, not bitterness, not even satisfaction at his obvious regret. Just nothing. "I forgive you," she said. Marcus looked shocked. "You do?" "I do," Nora confirmed. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your mistakes anymore. I forgive you, and I release you from my life. Completely." "Nora." "Goodbye, Marcus," she said firmly, then turned and walked back to Adrian. Adrian was watching her with an expression that was part concern, part admiration. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm perfect," Nora said, taking his hand. "Let's go celebrate." 1 year after renewing their vows, Nora and Adrian stood in the newly opened Eleanor Bennett Center for Educational Equity. It was Nora's dream made real, a comprehensive support center for underserved students, offering tutoring, mentoring, college counseling, and family support services. Adrian had funded it, but Nora had designed every program, hired every staff member, and shaped every aspect of its mission. It was entirely hers, and it bore her mother's name. "Your mother would be so proud," Adrian said, his arm around her waist as they looked at the bronze plaque bearing Eleanor's name. "I hope so," Nora said. "She always believed education could change lives. Now we get to prove her right." The center was already serving over 200 families, and they had a waiting list of 300 more. It was making a difference, a real, measurable difference. "You know what I realized today?" Adrian said. "What?" "A year ago, I thought losing you was the worst thing that could happen to me. And it was the most painful experience of my life. But it was also the catalyst for becoming the person I needed to be." He turned to face her fully. "I don't wish we'd gone through it. I hate that I hurt you, but I'm grateful for what it taught me. That love isn't about possession or control. It's about partnership and growth and choosing each other, over and over." Nora touched his face gently. "We almost didn't make it, but we did," Adrian said, "because you were brave enough to demand better, and I was humble enough to actually become it." "We make a good team," Nora said, echoing words from what felt like a lifetime ago. "The best team," Adrian agreed. That evening, they drove home to the townhouse they'd bought together, a fresh start in a space that belonged to both of them equally. As they got ready for bed, Adrian noticed Nora looking at something on her phone. "What are you smiling at?" he asked. "An email from Maya's mom," Nora said. "You remember Maya, the 7-year-old from the shelter? The one who loves to read? That's her. She just got accepted into a gifted program at her school. Her mom says it's because of the tutoring and confidence she built at the center." Adrian came to read over her shoulder, smiling at the grateful message. "That's because of you," he said. "It's because of us," Nora corrected. "None of this would exist without both of us." They climbed into bed, and Adrian pulled Nora close, her head resting on his chest. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I love you too," Nora replied. And this time, she believed it without reservation. This time, the love was built on truth and work and genuine change. This time, it would last. Asterisk, asterisk, epilogue, asterisk, asterisk. 5 years later, Nora stood at a podium addressing a crowd of education advocates at a national conference. The Eleanor Bennett Center had expanded to 3 locations. Their model had been adopted by organizations in 12 other cities. Hundreds of students had gone to college because of their programs. But today, Nora wasn't talking about programs or statistics. She was telling her story. 5 years ago, she said, I stood in the rain with a suitcase, having been thrown out by my husband who blamed me for his failures. I had nothing, no job, no home, no sense of who I was beyond what a man had told me I was worth. She paused, looking out at the audience. I could have stayed broken. I could have believed what he said about me, that I was a burden, that I'd never be anything on my own. And for a while, I did believe it. Nora's eyes found Adrian in the front row, sitting beside their 2-year-old daughter, Emma. But then someone saw me differently, not as a project to fix or a damsel to rescue, but as a person with value and potential. He gave me an opportunity, and I took it. I rebuilt myself, piece by piece. She smiled, and then I almost lost it all again, because the person who'd helped me rebuild said something in a moment of weakness that broke my heart. Words that echoed my deepest fears about myself. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. I left, and I had to decide, was I going to let one terrible moment define us, or was I going to see if people could actually change? Nora's voice grew stronger. The difference between my first husband and my second isn't that one hurt me and one didn't. They both hurt me. The difference is what they did after. One blamed me for pointing out the hurt. The other took responsibility and did the work to change. She looked directly at Adrian. Real love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do when you make them. Do you blame the other person, or do you look in the mirror and ask yourself how to be better? Nora concluded her speech with words she'd learned through hard experience. Don't settle for someone who only apologizes with words. Wait for someone who apologizes with action, with consistency, with genuine change, because that's the only apology that means anything. The audience erupted in applause, but Nora only had eyes for Adrian, who was wiping away tears while holding their daughter. After the speech, he met her backstage, Emma in his arms. "Mama," Emma squealed, reaching for Nora. Nora took her daughter and kissed her cheek, then looked at Adrian. "You told our story," he said. "I told the truth," Nora replied. "That love is messy and complicated, but it's worth fighting for when both people are willing to do the work." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for demanding better, for showing me what real love looks like." Nora smiled. "Thank you for becoming the person worthy of that love." As they left the conference center together, Nora, Adrian, and Emma, Nora thought about how far she'd come, from the woman standing in the rain with nothing, to the woman who'd built everything she dreamed of, not because a man saved her, but because a man saw her potential and she chose to believe in it. And because when that same man failed her, she'd been strong enough to walk away until he proved he could be better. Some stories aren't about starting over. They're about refusing to settle, about demanding that the people who love you actually show it through action, not just words, about understanding that you're worth the work it takes to build something real. Nora had learned all of life, that the hard way. But standing here now, with her daughter giggling in her arms and her husband looking at her like she hung the moon, with a center bearing her mother's name, changing lives every single day, she knew every painful step had been worth it. Because she hadn't just survived. She'd built a life she was proud of, with a partner who'd proven that people could change when they truly wanted to. And that was something no one could ever take away from her. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Adrian found Nora on the terrace of their townhouse, looking out at the city lights. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and settled beside her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life is now compared to the night Marcus kicked me out," Nora said. "How scared I was, how certain I was that I'd never trust anyone again." "And now?" Adrian asked. "Now I know that trust isn't about never being hurt," Nora said. "It's about being with someone who values that trust enough to do everything in their power not to break it again." She leaned against him. "I'm proud of you, you know," she said, "for the work you've done, the person you've become." "I'm proud of you too," Adrian replied, "for having the strength to walk away when you needed to, for demanding better, for giving me the chance to prove I could be better." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city breathe around them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't kept you as my emergency contact?" Nora asked. "All the time," Adrian admitted. "And then I remember that we were meant to find each other, maybe not the first time, when I was still too broken to appreciate you. But eventually, you really believe that?" Nora asked. "I do," Adrian said. "Some people are meant to change your life. You're mine, and I like to think I'm yours." "You are," Nora confirmed. "You showed me that I didn't have to accept less than I deserved, that I could demand respect and partnership and real love. And when you failed at giving me that, You showed me what it looks like when someone actually does the work to change." She turned to look at him. "That's the greatest gift you ever gave me. Not the job or the foundation or the center, but the example of what real accountability looks like." Adrian's eyes glistened. "I almost lost you because I forgot that for a moment. I'll never make that mistake again." "I know you won't," Nora said, "because you've proven it every single day for 5 years. That's not luck or chance. That's choice. Your choice to be better." Adrian pulled her closer. "My therapist asked me last week what I'm most grateful for." "What did you say?" "That you loved me enough to leave when I wasn't treating you right," Adrian said. "Because if you'd stayed and just accepted it, I never would have been forced to confront my own issues. Your leaving saved me as much as it saved you." Nora felt tears slip down her cheeks. "That's the most beautiful thing you've ever said to me." "It's the truth," Adrian said simply. They stayed on the terrace until the city grew quiet and the stars became visible through the light pollution. And when they finally went to bed, Nora fell asleep feeling something she'd never felt with Marcus: complete security in being loved exactly as she was. Sometimes the person who hurts you and the person who saves you are the same person. The difference is what they do after the hurt. Do they make excuses, shift blame, and repeat the same patterns? Or do they look in the mirror, do the hard work of change, and prove through consistent action that they've become someone different? Nora's story isn't about a perfect love. It's about a real one. About two people who failed each other and had to decide if failure meant the end or if it could be the beginning of something stronger. It's about understanding that you teach people how to treat you by what you accept, and that walking away from someone you love because they're not treating you right isn't giving up. It's respecting yourself enough to demand better. And sometimes, when you demand better, people rise to meet that demand. Not always, not even often, but sometimes. And when they do, when they prove through months and years of consistent action that they've truly changed, that's when you know you've found something worth keeping. Not because it was easy, but because both people valued it enough to fight for it the right way. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts about second chances, about the difference between words and action, about what real love looks like when it's tested. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, because stories about resilience, redemption, and love that's earned rather than given are what we're all about. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And remember, you are never obligated to accept less than you deserve, no matter how much you love someone. Real love doesn't ask you to diminish yourself. It helps you become more. Until next time.